But yeah, welcome everyone. Fantastic to have you here with us to this session looking at co-living, a housing alternative for Africa. So a really interesting topic, something I'm personally very interested in. And you know, the kind of shared economy, the revolution, or the co-theme that's come into the real estate industry, with more of a property or real estate as a service. And you know, we saw it in co-working, and there's co-kitchens, co-logistics, co sort of light industrial, and obviously co-living makes a lot of sense. And co-living was arguably the first sort of shared real estate, you know, with house shares, been around for quite a while, from student digs to, you know, young professionals, especially in cities with very high rents and property values. Such, you know, London, New York, etc. You know, there's been house sharing, flat sharing for a long time, and those markets, I'm more familiar with London. You know, we've seen the rise of the private rented sector, so a whole buildings built specifically to rent on, you know, traditional, perhaps short-term, but traditional one-year leases. And then the next step has been a formalization of this shared living or co-living, which we've seen some great examples coming out of different countries. And now in South Africa, we've seen some really interesting activity, which obviously brings me to one of those examples and providers. We have Moritz Walensik, if that's the right pronunciation.
Walensik, yes.
Walensik, great. Well, I'll let you try to pronounce my name, and then we even. But welcome, Moritz from Black Brick, which is a really innovative, quite creative provider that's come into the market around the living model and to create communities and basically a sort of membership environment with a whole host of amenities and events and, you know, interactions that really want to harness a community, which is a big part of co-living. So welcome, Ritz. Obviously just a little, but perhaps you would like to tell us a bit about yourself, maybe your background, and then your current role at Black Brick, and maybe in a short overview of what Black Brick actually is.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me. So yes, I'm the founder and CEO of Black Brick. My background is academically in law, and then in my early 20s, I was involved in a tech startup, which I sold in 2009. Since then, I've been in the hospitality real estate space, and in 2018, we launched Black Brick as a brand, which went out for sectional title sales. We sold incredibly well for the times. I think the product got quite a bit of traction early on. We sold, you know, 208, or rather, we sold 90% of the 208 apartments within 35 days of launching. So it was a, you know, a great sign that this product was ready for this time in history. We since have opened our doors in Johannesburg with the 208 apartments as of November 2020, and we've now opened up Cape Town with 100 units, and we've got a pipeline of about 1,200 in South Africa over the next 2 years, and we're looking to grow aggressively into Africa, into the US, and into Portugal, because our big mission, besides creating a place where you can do your best work and become the best version of yourself and accelerate your life in the property, we're also looking to create a network of properties that allows people to move seamlessly between cities, because people are becoming nomadic and digital. And so we're providing a real estate platform for that, to be a, you know, global digital nomad in what we call, you know, a club environment. So we have these clubs within our buildings that you can either, if you live there, you know, you can access the club facilities, and you can also become a club member and then participate in a lot of our programming that we do on site, as well as a lot of the discounts. So we offer both short and extended stays. So you can stay for a night, you can stay month to month, and we're quite flexible in that regard. So it gives you the ability to move between cities quite seamlessly. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Maurice. It's a really interesting example, and obviously you're angling at quite a niche market, I'd say. And it's like I said, there's that whole creative, what's the word? Very culture-centric, art-centric, just seeing your buildings and installations, etc., on social media. Really interesting what you're trying to do, and also showcasing, local artists, the interior design architects. Is just a really cool creative element to it. And like you said, just a really cool space you're creating on that club sort of membership side, but very much a community and a very different residential product for people. So a really interesting example. And just to clarify, so you mentioned the sectional title sale. So in effect, the building has its units. Private units, obviously, kitchen, bathroom, etc. And were those sold mostly to investors, or were the owner occupiers as well?
Yeah, predominantly investors. And then we have development is a means to an end for us. We're predominantly operators of black brick, the black brick product. So the sales is almost a way to develop these properties, and then they are purchased by investors, for which we manage the investment end to end. So we take it all the way from the sales process into transfers. Once it's occupiable, then we furnish it. We manage the tenants, the utilities, etc., everything for them. So it's an end-to-end solution, and our primary focus is that operational leg of the transaction. Yes.
Fantastic. So that really speaks to the real estate property as a service game, because it is all about operations, and there's a real coming together of hospitality and residential. As I mentioned in every other sector of the property industry, you get the same thing, but it's just real coming together, which is really interesting, because it is, I guess, a few years back, hotels were about creating an experience, a brand, and then a network like you guys are doing. But now it's moving along, because, like you said, living, patterns and demand for residential products has really changed. The nomadic culture, people move a lot more easily these days, even on formal jobs. But then you said this, remote working, freelance sort of gig economy. There's a real digital nomad culture. So really cool how you're coming into that.
If you look at, if you look at the product, if you look into one of our apartments, they're operated as at a hotel level service. Okay, so it's completely hospitality led. You can stay for a night and get full 4-star hotel services as you would in a traditional hotel, but they've also got kitchens, so you can live there for an extended period of time. And so the blurring of the lines between short stay and long stays is very strong, and it's a trend happening in many territories. What we're trying to do is make the transition between time and various locations seamless through technology. So the technology really enables you to transact with a otherwise quite innate object, being real estate, in a very dynamic and flexible way.
Fantastic, thanks. So that, technology is obviously an element. When you have this shared service, you obviously need a platform to enable that. And also it's like you're saying, the flexibility, that merging long, short term. People need flexibility. So a lot of people, would want, especially perhaps in a younger age brackets, not wanting to commit and buy a property because they're not sure where they want to live. They could work remotely, or they move. So I think the flexibility is the big thing, as with all this co-sharing within the property industry, and that seamlessness and having locations in different countries, cities, is, it adds to that. So fantastic, thanks.
Yeah, and I mean, we can speak about the market of the co-living sector maybe further on, but what's interesting is that the market is growing because the pre-family, call it lifespan, is increasing dramatically.
Yes.
You see? And so the millennial market is having, kids later, getting married later in life. So that market's really just expanding into, flexible shared service type real estate.
Exactly. People want to harness, if they do take that choice, to have families later, or maybe decide not to have families. They want to harness that, the flexibility, I guess, that comes with that. So very interesting. It's a cultural shift that's obviously creating demand here. So Isaac, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We just got started with a bit of an intro to Maritz and Black Brick, which is his and obviously his team's offering in the co-living space. Isaac coming to us from Kenya, Nairobi, I believe. That's it. Great. Welcome. I'll let you hand over. Maybe give us a brief intro of yourself and your role, obviously, within your business, maybe a bit about your background, and then please tell us a bit about the village, which is your offering in Kenya. Oh wait, I think you're on mute. I think now you're on mute. Try unmute again. There might be a microphone issue. We still can't hear you. Now it's showing you're on mute, so maybe unmute again and see if it works. Otherwise, you might just have to check your microphone. Okay, probably best to leave and come back. Well, we'll come back. Isaac can do his introduction, but let's move to our first question. So we've touched on some of this, but in a sort of wider scale, co-living comes in different formats. You obviously are focused individual units. Sometimes you have, it'll almost be like a dorm where you have a room and facilities and then shared amenities like kitchens, etc. So we'll come to that. Isaac's back. Sorry, let's just see. Isaac, can we hear you?
Yes, I can. How about now?
Fantastic. Yeah, loud and clear. Thanks so much. Okay. So if you could give us an intro of yourself and then obviously your business, please.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. And my apologies, I've come a bit late. Some connection issue. My name is Isaac Kamau. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya originally, and I co-founded the company called The Village. And what we do at The Village is to provide flexible living through a marketplace platform that we've been building. So our flexible living specifically is to offer co-living and shared accommodation in urban cities here in Kenya. Currently, we are in 5 cities in Kenya, and we've been able to acquire more than 250 rooms so far. And what we do is we work together landlords who have furnished apartments, and then we propose to them a co-living model where they can be able to make long-term income revenues as compared to the short-term, which is more prevalent in the market. So we've been able to curate the product and refine it over the last 2 years that we've been working, and we've seen some really good traction, even though COVID-19 affected the movement of people from one location to another. So ideally what we are doing is to use a platform-based model to offer co-living. But in the initial sense, our approach was to utilize, we have so many unoccupied spaces in Nairobi City. And when we were starting out, we were thinking, how about we convert the available spaces that are not being rented out into co-living spaces, so that we are able to utilize the spaces that we have and be able to increase the number of revenue a landlord is able to get in per month. Because at the moment, you'll find that most development properties have like 60% occupancy rate, and we're just looking at how we can expand it from 60% and move it towards 90%. So that was our initial sense when we were starting out The Village. But when COVID-19 came in, we decided not to use that model, since we were at risk of a lot of asset investment, and at the same time, slow booking, a lot of cancellation came in when COVID-19 just hit the country, and we had to like pivot very quickly so that we were able to help other people who are facing the same problem we were facing when we were operating a physical space, and be able to bring them on board. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isaac. Very interesting. Obviously, we have two different approaches here, because like I said, there's many facets to what co-living could be and how you approach that. So really interesting. Also interesting how you were able to pivot, I think, because of your model, and it's empowered by a platform that you could actually put to perhaps what you offer, how you offer, and you might have seen some stock, people perhaps cancel longer term leases and stock comes in, there's all sorts of shifting dynamics, and your platform can, excuse me, accommodate that, which is great. And also your approach, so the approaches here with the two businesses, yours was to go to those landlords with large rental stock. Obviously that was sitting vacant, and you're like, if we bring that onto our platform, we package it. So like BlackBrick, there's a bit of a there's a platform, a culture there. There's a service focus. So it's not just, you don't just rent from a landlord. There's a whole other spectrum around that. And if you're with the Village, if you're with BlackBrick, there's access to services, amenities, etc., and a network. Like you said, you're across Kenya. So if you're moving around the country, it's also, you're sort of a member with this organization, like a gym, so you can move around. Really fantastic. And I like how you go into the landlord to solve that issue as well, especially in, sort of increasing housing efficiency in our cities. What are people demanding? They want that flexibility, like Maritz was saying. And then also affordability is a thing. So again, there's different levels of the market, and there's a lot of opportunities at each level. And then on the affordable end, which we'll touch on here as well, how the co-living can come in, and with those economies of scale, you can probably target a more affordable sector, and you've got the scale of these units, etc. Lots of opportunities. So thanks very much for that introduction. And then just to kick off, I think we've covered it a bit, but just to get your kind of key points briefly, co-living it can mean a lot of things, and also when there's these new terms in any industry, there's some confusion. And like I said, there could be different things, so people get confused. Like, do I have a room and a shared bathroom? Do I have my own bathroom, shared kitchen, etc.? So, and then there's the key themes about it. So, Maritz, if you started with co-living for you, like in the greater scheme of the property industry, what does that mean for you?
Sure. Firstly, Isaac, welcome, and good to meet you. Sounds great what you're doing over there. I'd like to chat more. So co-living as a sector originated as a cottage industry, almost by speculative, opportunistic type of property players who took, houses with 3 or 5 bedrooms and then carved them up into smaller spaces, getting, rentals, individual rentals from individual tenants who would then occupy a room or share a room, and then share certain facilities like kitchens, etc. And so I think that co-living as a brand has remained within that understanding. I think most people, when they think co-living, they think of that. But the fact of the matter is that the co-living industry over the last few years has evolved quite substantially. I mean, you have brands like The Collective now, for example, that they're building 500 unit blocks with individual apartments and shared facilities. Is that still co-living? It's a debate, But I think the stigma around, because there is a stigma in my opinion around co-living, is the shared amenities space, and the reduction in privacy, and potentially the lack of aspirational brand attachment, if that makes sense. So as an aspirational person, being in a digs type of environment isn't necessarily attractive. And so I think that on that front, if it would remain as that product, it would be stifled or limited to a certain market size. However, if we look at it in a broader sense as to what I would define co-living as today, it would be the big box buildings with shared facilities. I think that's the key. Whether or not that includes kitchens is also a nuance, but preferably they should have at least kitchenettes, in my opinion, if you want to take it to a scalable market. And by having it at a certain size per property, for instance, and layering it with technology, you're able to build the scales of economy that can make it more affordable for people. So it does have an important knock-on effect going after a slightly amended version of what co-living used to be.
Thanks, John. Interesting how you describe that journey of evolution, because the cottage industry and what was the initial stages of co-living came from a change in dynamics, probably a move towards cities, increasing rentals, etc. So really interesting how that's evolved, and now there's a real need, and it's cemented its role. It's a part of the residential offering, and really interesting, like you say, where it's come to now, which is fantastic. Isaac, your key thoughts on what co-living means for you? Are you still with us? I see you turned your video off. You're welcome to leave it off if it's maybe helps with the bandwidth.
Sorry, pardon?
Oh, welcome. Yeah, just I was saying, if you need to leave your video for connectivity, that's fine. But you're welcome either way. But just following on from Maritz there, I was just asking, what are your key what comes to mind, the key points when if you were to describe co-living to someone, what does it mean to you?
For me, co-living is with another person. It might be a person whom you don't know, because the way we've sharing of spaces was with family members or friends you're familiar with. But co-living is kind of a professional way of sharing spaces with other people, with a bit of a setup that is more guided on how you're supposed to utilize the spaces. So that's the way I view co-living, because you have to put a structure for it to function and for everything to come together and for people to be happy while they are sharing spaces.
Fantastic, thank you for that, Joe. So I think we've got a great idea of the concept, and obviously it can be varied and it changes a lot. So yeah, we've discussed also why the need has arisen in our as changing preferences, and also access to housing has perhaps become a challenge, for certain income groups. So I just want to bring it to, like I've mentioned, the lower income markets, and where opportunities could exist across these income brackets. So it seems like it could offer a lot of opportunities, shared amenities, building layouts, providing opportunities perhaps for lower operating costs and increasing income per square meter, as opposed to when you just rent out these flats individually on one-year leases. There's a way that the costs and the investment case can make sense for these landlords and providers, and also you could perhaps have locations close to economic opportunities, which is a big thing in African cities. Kenya, South Africa, lots of these cities, there's a lot of urban sprawl, and people, lower income groups, traditionally travel far and spend a lot of money on transport. So there's a lot of ways that this flexibility could also assist us in our our challenge of affordable housing. So just starting off, what are your thoughts about low-cost co-living and its potential to address challenges in African regions? So, we'll speak to the opportunity and its potential, and obviously a key thing is maybe the barriers if you're playing it with lower rentals, etc. What you can do. Maybe Isaac, if you want to kick us off, and then Maritz can follow on. Oh, sorry, Isaac has dropped off. So Maritz, over to you.
Sure. So firstly, I think it's very possible to address the income bands across various income brackets. So and in the low end, I think it's very possible through, as I mentioned before, technology and scale. The interesting thing that happened specifically with COVID is that remote working has been drastically accelerated. And this was a trend that's been on the rise for some time now, but it has really been it's been thrown into a different dimension, and I think a large portion of that post-COVID will remain. And so what's interesting about that in terms of making it affordable for lower income brackets is that, as you mentioned rightly, in urban sprawl cities, you have a lot of lost income and time due to travel. And so take, for example, Black Brick, which is not on the lower income bracket, but the principles still apply, is that within the same building, you can live and work and socialize and accelerate. So you basically have everything you need within this vertical village. So we call our product a vertical village from time to time. And it has everything. What that does is it creates efficiencies within your daily routine and drastic cost savings. So if you couple scale, technology, with the practicalities of staying in one space that is close to the economic opportunity, I think you've got a trifecta that really puts you in a very strong position to be able to tackle the call it the lower income housing problem. And secondly, the challenges that exist are the typical challenges, those of operators who are coming into the space, who understand the need, okay, having a great idea or frustration on their own behalf, which drives innovation most of the time, okay. But they have no access to network, they have no access to funding, they have no access to opportunities. So it's up to our industry to come together and to share those resources and enable young operators to come into the space and to give them an opportunity to create the product that they themselves want. And for example, that's where I came from. It was years of frustration wanting this thing, and it took 8 years, but at the end of the day, it was created, and it really is. It's doing what it's meant to be, and I think it can be across the income bracket. It can be shifting left and right of that. Fantastic,
thank you. There is a clear case, obviously identified that there are fundamental challenges that are at play, but there's a lot to be said, like you said, the social impact of bringing in at whatever income group it is, and perhaps promoting integration.
Hi, Sin.
But you said, hi, Isaac, you with us, right? Yeah, just a sec. I think you're back with us. You can leave your video off maybe for the connection issue. But like you said, people being able to live and work, in these buildings, and you could even have something where there's small, workshop spaces. Maybe people are creators, and small scale manufacturers. Like you really can harness this, and then, like you said, people. A lot of it is access to networks, and like being close to economic opportunities is out of reach for a lot of people in our cities. So
it's the small things as well, right? It's the not just access to opportunities, but access to services. So from if you start a business, for example, you're a young entrepreneur. You don't know how to start a company, open up a PTY Limited. You don't know anything about taxes and all of that. So having access to on-demand services through technology again is not an expensive asset to have at your fingertips.
Hello.
So all of these little touch points just add layers to the acceleration of that portion of the economy.
It's really interesting. Like you said, it's up to the industry to respond. And the whole affordable housing question, the models, there's been varying levels of success across the world. So this is really interesting because you provide a lot more than the home is safe, secure, functional home is a key, human right, and also for, to move forward, move out of poverty, etc. But with this, you can provide a whole lot more. There's kind of co-working, incubator programs, and this is kind of the same. It's like it's that, but plus there's a living, socializing network, whole element to this, and its space and the services are key, like you said, because that's access to the services puts people at a big or lack of access, big disadvantage. So really interesting and quite exciting. And like you said, like yourself, you came out of this, and a lot of the innovation and the prop check driven stuff in the property industry is from frustrations from sort of the younger, newer generations, but also existing people across the spread. Have seen our technology or doing things differently, or different consumer trends have given them opportunities to do something differently and disrupt. Because there's a very slow-moving analog industry, kind of like banking, property, and we've seen that change. And it is up to the industry and up to perhaps the new generation to perhaps push the status quo, do something different. Convince and find partners to work with, those established partners that can obviously share massive amounts of skill and experience. So it's quite interesting. And like, we're moving, I've finished varsity in 2010, and the people I studied with moving into roles in their own businesses and companies. It's quite cool to see this dynamic shifting. So really cool to hear your thoughts and your vision as well. And I agree 100% how we can push things from within and really make a difference. Because we've got to do things differently. We've been trying to do things the same for decades, and some of them work, but some of them, we need to tweak and complement them. So,
absolutely.
I'm very excited for that. Isaac, coming back to you, it looks like you with us again. So this topic was basically the opportunities and challenges for co-living to address, affordable, lower income housing solutions in African cities. Because there's such a demand and such a need, and it's difficult from traditional mechanisms sometimes to deliver what's needed. So this is really cool, because then, like you said, you can use existing stock. Sometimes you don't have to sort of build things on the periphery of the city, or demolish. And the same, like with Black Brick, they repurpose buildings, so it's retrofitting. And the one in Sandton was actually an older office building that had been a lot of vacancies for quite a few years. So that's also interesting. Recycling that stock, that's another element that's very exciting. But sorry, Isaac, your thoughts on the opportunity and obviously your experience. I'm not familiar with your sort of product offering, if it's across different income price points, but overall, what's your thoughts on co-living, as to access affordable and provide affordable housing?
Yeah, for us, we are targeting professionals who are aged between 24 to around 35 years of age, and those are like earning middle income in Kenya, but specifically able to solve a lot of housing problems of many African young people who will be meeting housing, because the population keeps on increasing so many years as we go by. And of course, for the urban centers where coming in to get their jobs and to get more opportunities, the pressure keeps on mounting. And there is a huge opportunity just for living to be a service that can be able to just come in right at the time, using the already existing spaces and just redefining how people view sharing of spaces, because you can be able to share spaces with other people, but if there is no structuring around sharing of spaces, then feel comfortable sharing spaces. Yeah, so and then the other thing is the government, of course, is working towards and sector to provide more housing, but the capacity to build cannot be accelerated because there's a lot of work to do. So people need to think of how do they use existing spaces. You might have office spaces that are not being used. You can find a whole building almost more than 60% empty. So how do you convert these units into a housing unit to be more affordable for the common people who are earning a basic salary? So the city also think of how they are going to change their regulation around housing so that they are able to meet the demands as they go, because this is a non-demand product, because more people are coming into the city, and if we don't act upon it, then there is a huge possibility that we'll be having more people in slums that will come up, because when people miss housing, then they will go and create some small shanties where they can be able to live. So that's my perspective, and the Kenyan government is actually having an affordable housing agenda countrywide to provide, I think, 500 units in about 5 years. And this started like in 2017, and it's supposed to go up until 2024, 2025. So, but people have to collaborate with the private sector. Government have to look at technology. They also have to look at the future of the cities, and they have to make solutions for these problems that are mounting to every other city that is coming up, or the cities that are more popular, because more people will continue coming in, even though we have COVID-19 just limiting people from moving. But once COVID-19 is out of the scene, then we'll be having more people coming to the city. Yeah.
Thank you, Isaac. Also seems that you both obviously, there's a similar focus on the segments of the market. You're focusing, those young professionals, perhaps people who've been working for a few years. So there's obviously a real opportunity there. And there was something missing, like Marit said, and like you saying. There is something, especially if you're a young graduate, but then also perhaps your salary increases and you want something a bit different. And maybe you don't want to sign a 1-year lease, etc. And you want that community, There's a lot of reasons that can add, sort of enrich your life. But like you both said, there is a definite opportunity at the lower price points, that sector of the market. And Isaac, you mentioned the government show that Kenya has got a big, obviously, drive. It's one of the 5 pillars, I believe, is affordable housing, which is crucial. And obviously in South Africa, there's been a number and have been ongoing affordable housing initiatives and drive. But it seems like, I think private sector governments should embrace the co-living model as well, I think, and speak to providers, and to see how policy could perhaps change and accommodate this, and how, because if subsidies come into it, it'd be quite interesting as a sort of co-living provider, what you could actually accomplish in cities and what kind of community programs you could deliver. So that's a really good, I think, a good point. And it's, things are slow moving and housing's very complex. There's a lot of obviously moving parts, a lot of really good people doing great work in private and public sector. But I think co-living, maybe we need to drive the topic a bit more. And I know, Isaac, I see that you're a co-living ambassador with the Co-Live organization. I think that's really interesting. It'd be great to get things connected in the regions, I believe. Could you mind telling us just in a few minutes, just briefly about that initiative, that association?
Yeah, so I became Co-Live ambassador for Kenya at the beginning of the year. And what Co-Live is actually doing is bringing all the industry players in the co-living system together so that they're able to share resources, information. They can be able to change tack when people are facing in different cities, and they're able to build each other. So, which is a non-governmental organization, is helping co-living operators and developers to be able to create more spaces that are able to tackle the issue of affordable housing globally. So the beauty of it all is that you're able to interact with other operators, developers who are bringing up co-living infrastructure in the world, and you can be able to borrow ideas from another city, from another operator, and you can be able to actually shorten your process of starting up if you're a newbie in the industry, so that you're able to accelerate the service provision to the members of your community.
So yeah, it's really great to hear that initiative. And I think it's something I'm not aware that it's in that kind of formalized space or structure that's happening in other regions or countries on the continent. So that would be, it sounds fantastic. I'm very excited to hear. And I think, South Africa would be great to see a South African chapter there. And obviously it'd be great to engage, I think, offline, and also maybe PropTech Africa, the Africa PropTech Forum. We're all in this together. So I think it'll be great to learn more and perhaps see if we can get the conversation driven more formally like you're doing in South Africa and other countries. So
yeah,
fantastic, thank you. We've got 2 questions here. I thought we'd just address those as we come into our last 15 minutes. So quite a specific one, quite an interesting one as well, something I hadn't thought of. Perhaps Maurits, we start with you. Are there any insurance providers or insurance products that are aimed specifically at your type of properties? I'm just guessing. I was just thinking about it. Insurance for hotels, hospitality. I guess some of it, maybe it's a kind of amalgamation of normal sectional title insurance. But in your experience, has there been have you needed to kind of be creative with your insurance providers, or does the system accommodate you?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about that before, but I can tell you about the experience we've had. So, as you know, in a sectional title building, you have call it various layers. So you have a body corporate, then you've got, in our case, you've got a club component. So there's within the facilities, there's an activated club component where we have people activating spaces with programming and talks and services, etc. Then you have the short stay component, so those are typically hotel guests. And then you have the mid stay component, which is, let's say, month to month guests in effect. And so you have and on top of that, you've got the public accessing our 2 restaurants, for instance. And so you've got all these different user groups, and you do have to cater for each one of them from an insurance, public liability perspective. And on top of that, you've got the asset itself. So you have the body corporate asset, the building envelope with the corridors and common areas as a section, and then you have the individual units as a section, and then on top of that, you've got the furniture as another asset. And so let's say there's 10 different categories of insurance where you could contract with them all individually. What we did is that we got a blanket cover insurance that tackles all the eventualities, and then all the different parties sign on to that policy, so that if there is something that happens, for example, from a public liability perspective in the common areas, whether or not that person is a guest or a resident or a public person, we would be covered for that. And then, of course, the general, fire and theft and bilking and all of that, very specialized hospitality insurance around guest theft and loss. And so we have considered and covered all of those areas, even down into business interruption. So we make sure that all of those bases are covered. And in our case, we were fortunate enough to deal with a very competent insurance company called Kinsella, who are specialists in the space, and they really spend time understanding the business. So if anyone needs that service, I would highly recommend it.
Fantastic, thank you, Maurits. Yeah, very multifaceted. I mean, that insurance is a very specific and very important element, but the operations are really where the magic happens, obviously, with co-living. And yeah, the sectional title, for people that might not be aware, in South Africa, that's a legislated structure for complex living, so multi-unit living. And like Maurits said, there's a body corporate, which is made up of the owners who are jointly owned and responsible for common areas and the external structure of the buildings, etc. So that's obviously an element to consider in our markets. Isaac, in your experience, insurance for your properties, is it standard, or have things had to be sort of tweaked a bit?
For us, the insurance product we have locally are pretty much standard, but the opportunity that we've seen that we need to tackle as a company, all together with insurance company, is creating an insurance product specifically for co-living customers, specifically who are looking to maybe move into a space. Do they pay a deposit? So can we get an insurance cover for the deposit, or can we be able to cover for the operator so that when someone fails to pay rent, then the insurance that the client has been contributing, they can be able to cover that up. So those are that we are looking up for our model, so that we're able to take care of our properties, the landlords that we are partnering with, and so that we give them more surety that there is a bigger opportunity when they work with us as compared to just using the normal model of renting houses.
Fantastic, yeah. Thanks. Again, the angle of working with the landlords and then obviously securing that rental income is another element which is really interesting in the pure rental model. So fantastic insights. Thank you both. We've actually run out of time. Thanks a lot. I got caught up in the conversation there. I've really enjoyed it, so we'll have to end there. But Maritz, Isaac, thank you so much. I think you brought both really interesting perspectives, both geographically and also in the type of products that you're offering and your understanding of the wider market. So really fantastic. And I hope we can keep the conversation going and get some, maybe some collaboration or at least conversation going, in terms of the co-living sector, maybe speaking about things at a high level. Maybe we can interact more on that. But thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the sessions, and yes, I look forward to speaking to you both again soon, I think. So thanks again.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks, Isaac.